Okay, good evening. I'll call the meeting to order at 7 p.m. Inform the public that this meeting is being conducted with remote participation. First order of business is reorganization of the board. I would entertain a motion for chairman.
Also make a motion.
Okay, who are you a motion for, Mr. Shivo?
Yes, for Selectman Riley.
Okay, I will second that. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, Ms. Riley, I'll turn it over to you for the vice chair and the clerk's position.
Thank you, Mr. Pacheco, and just want to thank my fellow selectmen for the honor, Mr. Shivo and Mr. Pacheco. I will try to do my very best to keep us on track during our meetings. And really, we are a three-member team, all of us equally elected, and I know that working together, we can do great things to move the town of Raynham forward. So thank you. And with that, I will entertain a motion for vice chairman.
I will make such a motion, Madam Chair, and I would make a motion that Selectman Pacheco be vice chair.
And that's a motion by Mr. Shivo for Mr. Pacheco as vice chairman. I second that motion. And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I think I understand that, but when we're meeting remotely, all of our votes should be roll call votes. So that was an aye from all three of us, Mr. Shivo, Mr. Pacheco, and myself, for a unanimous vote for Mr. Pacheco as the vice chairman. I'll entertain a motion for the secretary clerk of the board.
Yeah, I'd make a motion for Mr. Shivo.
A motion by Mr. Pacheco for Mr. Shivo. I'll second that motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And that's again unanimous vote with Mr. Shivo, Mr. Pacheco, and myself voting in favor. So we are reorganized. Thank you very much. The next order of business is the acceptance of the minutes. And I will looking for a motion to accept the minutes of the June 16th meeting of the Board of Selectmen as printed.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I'll make a motion to accept with one caveat that the comments I made relative to the communication breakdown with BR were associated with the town administrator. The district gave proper notification to our office. It was once it got to our office that the board wasn't appropriately notified. So with that as a motion, I'll accept the minutes.
Okay, we can accept that as the amended minutes, and I will second them since Mr. Shivo was not in attendance at that meeting. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And that is accepted. And also a motion to accept as printed the minutes of the June 23rd meeting.
I'll make a motion to accept as printed.
Motion to accept as printed by Mr. Pacheco. Do we have a second?
I will second that motion.
Second by Mr. Shivo. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And that is a unanimous vote with Mr. Shivo, Mr. Pacheco, and myself in favor of that. I will just send out a thank you to our recording secretary, Janice Murphy. It is always a challenge to record the minutes and to report them, particularly so with our telemeetings. Sometimes there's interference, microphone not working, and so forth. So a special thank you to Janet for that. Next on the agenda, we have department heads and committees. We have no department heads listed, but I believe our town clerk, Marcia Sylvia, would like to speak. Marcia?
Me? Hi. Can you hear me, Kat?
Yes, go right ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the election. I wanted to congratulate everybody that ran and that won. Our poll workers did a fantastic job. There were difficult conditions. It was very hot and muggy, and they wore the face coverings, they sanitized, and they were excellent, and we were really pleased with them, and we're very proud of them. Also, the voters, they came out during the unprecedented time under the same conditions, and it was really nice to see. I hope we did our best to make sure everybody was safe, and I hope people did feel that they were safe. I also wanted to thank the highway department. They did a great job for setting up the polls. And my husband helped too. He volunteered a few hours, so I wanted to say that too. The custodians were great. Everybody really pitched in, and it was really teamwork. And I was really pleased, and I just wanted to thank everybody involved in that, as well as the selectmen for all your support and help. There was just one more thing that I wanted to address. I was told that there was something said on social media regarding absentee ballots, and that people said that they didn't receive them. I just wanted to let the people know that I can assure you that an absentee ballot was and always is sent out for every application that we receive. Even applications that were received the week of the election, as well as a few days before the election, we sent out ballots. I had people calling me at home to find out if ballots had been sent, and they were. And I know it's frustrating. Some people didn't get them, but it's frustrating for us as well because we did work additional hours to make sure that the ballots were mailed out as soon as possible. We made a couple of trips during the day, in addition to the mail being picked up at the town hall. We received 287 absentee ballot applications, and 287 absentee ballots were sent out. Unfortunately, clerks throughout the state were having the same issues with delayed delivery times. And the clerks have reached out to the Secretary of State's office so we can all work together to try to resolve this. It's frustrating to everyone, and this is by no means anything against the Postal Service. We've reached out to distribution centers, and they're also frustrated dealing with the COVID-19 absences and layoffs. And as a result, they're understaffed as well. So it's understandable the delivery times are longer than we're used to. But I'd also like to remind people, if you don't receive a ballot, to please call us, because then we can resolve the situation and we're aware of it. So I just wanted to say that and let people know that. And please call us if you have applied and you haven't gotten them, because I can assure you that they were all sent out. And I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcia, and thank you. Obviously, I know it was a huge task. I did go to vote on Saturday, and everything was handled really, really well. I think everybody could feel totally safe being there. Everything was set up really well, and as you said, thanks to everybody that helped out with that effort. Does any one member of the board have questions or comments for Mrs. Sylvia?
No questions, but comments. I was going to do it on the Selectmen's report, but just congratulate you, Marcia, and your entire team on running a great election. You not only had to balance the regular election dynamic every year, but also manage an election in the middle of a global pandemic. And I think it's unfortunate that anybody would offer any type of criticism of you or your staff. It's wholly unwarranted. It's a little disturbing and disappointing for sure. And I just wanted to extend my personal appreciation to you, to Amy, and to your entire team, because as always, in my opinion, you did a phenomenal job, and anybody who says anything less should really look themselves in the mirror.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you. We appreciate that.
So Pat, I will just, if I may,
Sure.
I will second Joe's comments. I thought it was handled very well under very trying circumstances, to say the least. I think, I don't know how the 281 absentee ballots compares with past years, but I think that's quite a bit compared to usual. That's my guess. Maybe perhaps Marcia could speak to that, but in any event, the overall effort was outstanding, and the results speak for themselves.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Chairman.
Yes, it was. Last year we had 133 absentee ballots, and that was quite a few. But this year, we're quite a bit more. But thank you. I appreciate that, and we'll pass it along to everyone involved. Teamwork, that's for sure.
That's right. Thank you, Marcia. Any other
Thank you.
department? You're welcome. Any other department heads that wish to speak at this time? Seeing none, we will continue with completion of, well, we have no appointments, so completion of all the business. The first agenda item is Town Hall Operations, Community Policy, Communication Policy continued. And this, I don't know, Mr. Chavo, if you've been brought up to speed on this. I know you did meet with our town administrator. This was a policy that Mr. Pacheco had proposed, and I will just read the draft of it. Was Town of Raynham Communication Policy, some bullets for this. Constituent communication should be responded to within 48 hours, excluding weekends, holidays, and when Town Hall has been authorized for closure. Staff who have planned absences shall utilize both auto replay on email as well as adjusting their voicemail to reflect their absence from work and stipulate who the constituent may reach during the entirety of their absence. And escalated constituent inquiries shall be responded to within 24 hours of escalation, excluding weekends, holidays, and when town hall has been authorized for closure. At the last week's meeting, we tabled it for a week and we asked our town administrator to check with our department heads for any input from them. Mr. Waters, our town administrator, is also in attendance this evening. Graham, did you get any response from our department heads?
Yes, Madam Chair. I sent those comments to the board for consideration. The responses, we received 3 from department heads. I don't know, Madam Chair, if you'd like me to read them or if the board has the copy to discuss amongst themselves.
No, I think if you could read them, that would be fine, Mr. Waters.
Sure. The first comment was, I think a response time of 48 hours is fair, but I'd like to know what the board considers a quote unquote escalated constituent inquiry. Do they mean if it's an emergency? And if so, who determines what an emergency is? I don't feel a lack of planning is considered an emergency. Second comment is, could they be more specific as to why they mean, what they mean by escalated on the last bullet point? And third comment was, should escalation be defined? Also, I would suggest distributing a how-to on utilizing the auto reply email function and adjusting voicemail greeting to all employees with the policy. And those were the 3 comments that were provided as feedback, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Waters. Mr. Pacheco, Mr. Shavo, do you have any input?
Yeah, I would make a motion that we approve it with the caveat that we add in the definition of escalated, which is a phone call from a or email from a member of the Board of Selectmen once one of us has been contacted by a constituent.
Okay, that's a motion. Do we have a second or
I would second that motion. And I do have one other comment, if I may, but I think that's a reasonable definition for escalated. I have studied the policy bullet and with Graham Waters, and I understand it. I think it's reasonable. The one question that I would bring up, the last point that Graham mentioned with regard to some of the individuals in the town having a bit of training. Would you explain that a little bit? Is there an opportunity here for them to understand better how to use auto reply or whatever, or is that not an issue?
Graham?
Yeah, that shouldn't be an issue. Doing a how-to, it's something I can have Tim look into and issuing a quick email to all the employees with a town email on how to do the auto reply. I'm sure there's instructions on the internet for it.
Okay,
Yeah. Sorry, Pat. I just want to say that in my estimation, is as obvious as that may be, I think that covers all the bases, that anybody who has any question about how to apply that has a direct input as part of the overall, effort. So I think that will help the opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Shavo. If I could, just under discussion, after looking over the comments and so forth, I would just propose this as maybe a little explanation or additional wording for clarification, that we include that an escalated inquiry shall consist of an inquiry that is brought to the attention of a member of the Board of Selectmen due to non-response from the particular office or department. And the reason I say that, so that the intent doesn't go out there that you can contact a selectman, you don't have to go through the other procedures, that you're going to get better response by contacting a selectman rather than calling a particular office. So just for clarification purposes, and also, if again, Mr. Pacheco, this is in accordance with what your proposal is, that in the event that the communication or inquiry is not of an urgent or critical nature, a response might consist of an acknowledgement of the communication with confirmation that the matter will be addressed as soon as possible and follow through with action as expeditiously as possible. Would that be?
Yeah, I have no issues with any of those, Ms. Riley. I just want a policy in place
Sure.
to ensure that the taxpayers are being respected and responded to.
Absolutely.
Well, I do have a question. I'm sorry, Pat, I do have a question. Here's my question. This escalation means that the individual deserves a response in a shorter period of time than the standard 48 hours. In other words, within 24 hours. So if they don't get a response, I think if they don't get a response within 24 hours, then they have the option of calling the selectman directly. Is that what you mean?
I
You
think
know what I'm saying? In other words, I mean, if it's a two-tiered approach, which I think is a good idea, in other words, they ought to have what you're saying is they ought to have a shot first at the department where they're getting an answer. I think that's great. But I think we got to be careful that if they don't get that answer, not in 48 hours, because if we wait for 48 hours for them to contact the selectman, we have certainly, ill-defined the word escalated. So I think we need to be careful and say, well, if they have a situation which they believe requires a response within 24 hours, then and they don't get it because they've declared it to be an emergency of some kind. I know this is a bit circular, but the other way we're dealing with it is, okay, if you don't get it in 48 hours, call the selectman. I mean, if we're okay with that.
Yeah, that's not the intent, right? Exactly.
Yeah,
I
so
would suggest this. What about if we go forward with your motion, Mr. Pacheco, to approve the concept, and that we try to draft this a little bit so it includes all of those concerns, and then perhaps at the next meeting we can finalize the actual wording of it. But in the meantime, the intent, which I think is clear, we vote to support that at this time. Would that be acceptable?
I have no issues, and it would not only obviously apply to email, but voicemail. And my understanding is there's still issues with the phone system, despite assurances from the administrator that it's been resolved. And when people hit 0 to get to our office, it's still going to a particular department's office. So I think that needs to be rectified immediately.
Okay, so if I may jump in, I would, if that's a motion, Pat, I would second that motion. That is, let's go back and just tweak this concept of escalated and contacting us, and how do we work in the notion of escalation with regard to the contacting us. I think I agree with you. We're all in agreement that we need a maximum amount of time that our public can expect to have answers. So that's not the question. We just want to make sure that this is as defined as it can be, so there's no confusion.
Absolutely. All right, so we'll go forward with that, and maybe our town administrator can work on that, send us out the actual draft of that before the next meeting. We can approve the actual wording at the next meeting, but at this point, we'll go forward with the motion to accept the intent of this. So if that's fine with everybody, I will call for a roll call vote. Mr. Pacheco?
Aye.
Mr. Shavo?
Aye.
And I vote aye, unanimous vote. Thank you very much.
Madam Chair, if I may, because a lot of conversation took place, if each selectman could email me sort of a synopsis of their input on the revisions. Otherwise, I'll have to wait for the minutes to come out.
No, absolutely. I think we could each do that, Mr. Waters. Definitely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, next on the agenda, completion of old business, master plan committee recommendations. And this was also tabled from last week's meeting. We had a recommended list from the master plan committee. Just by way of a little background, I believe Serp had originally recommended that the master plan committee could be the planning board, or they could have a separately appointed committee, and the selectmen could approve that, which is the route that they wanted to go. And there were certain boards that they recommended have members on this committee, and we have a list. And I'll just read that list. It says Derek Swenson for the school department, John Texera, Council on Aging, Kevin Marrera, Conservation Commission, David Lamarco, Finance Committee, Brendan Loftus, Capital Planning, Tim McCray, Parks and Recreation, Daniel Andrade, Planning Board, the new member of the Planning Board, which I believe is also Mr. Andrade. I'm not sure the first name. Someone help me.
Matthew.
Matthew Andrade, thank you, Joe. David LaPlante is an at-large member. Gary Houghton is an at-large member. Graham Waters, Town Administrator, and Robert Iafredi, the Building Department. And I believe it was tabled last week at Mrs. Smith's request to Mr. Waters to check with our, I think, Mr. Iafredi to see if the planning board members had all been asked if they wanted to serve. Were we able to do that, Graham?
Yeah, and I asked Bob to be on this meeting. I know he's been messaging me that he's having technical difficulties, but Mr. Matthew Andrade is the newest member of the planning board. And if I believe if Mr. Pacheco and Ms. Riley, if you look back at your prior lists, there might have been a slot reserved for the new planning board member pending the election.
And I believe my understanding is that actually there's going to be opportunity for lots of people to have input, and hopefully many people will. This is the committee that really their primary task is going to be to try to get the information out to everybody in the community and coordinate things. But this shouldn't be a limited list. I think many other people can certainly get involved with that. So does anyone want to make a motion at this point?
I would first, Madam Chair, comment that I did speak to Bob as well, and to the point that was brought up last week, the two members from the planning board were the only two that expressed interest to serve, and so I think we should offer appreciation to them for wanting to serve. And with that, I would make a motion to accept the slate as presented so they can actually start getting to work.
Excuse me, Madam Chair, I do have one question. So this is new to me, so bear with me. Is there, that's a rather large committee to say the least. Is there a chair of that committee? And that's probably a dumb question, but not having any more background in the recent, is there a chair?
I believe the building commissioner, Mr. Iafredi, is going to head that up, but they will be working very closely with Serp representatives.
Yeah.
So I don't believe, we haven't certainly designated specifically a chairperson.
Madam Chair, I believe Mr. Iafredi is on the line to speak about it.
Oh, terrific. Mr. Iafredi, are you with us? Just the wonders of remote meetings.
He says not yet.
Not yet. Okay. Well, maybe he can join us later on. Should we hold that motion until Mr. Iafredi can join us?
He's letting me know that the committee has not designated a chair. Once the Board of Selectmen approve this slate, then the committee will get together at a meeting and designate a chair amongst themselves.
With that said,
Thank
Madam Chair, then I would second the motion. I think, you know, the need for a chair to bring things together with Serp and so forth is critical. So I second the motion with the proviso that a chair will be picked once the committee is in place.
Thank you, Mr. Shavo. So we have a motion by Mr. Pacheco, second by Mr. Shavo. All in favor?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye, so it is a unanimous 3 votes in favor of that. And also next on our list of completion of old business, discussion and action, non-union employee contracts. Michaela Brito Patton, our Veteran Service Officer, Michael Doyle, our Plumbing Inspector, and Deborah Dooney, our Executive Assistant. Do we have a motion?
Madam Chair, due to Ms. Dooney having made a request that wasn't relayed to us in executive session, I would motion to table her contract till the next meeting to take that up, or as an alternative, approve it as is, and if we want to at a later date, do it. But I believe the whole process of having an executive session is to vet everything beforehand, and the request should have been brought to us during the multiple execs we had discussing this. So I'm open to how the board wants to handle it, but I don't think the board can accept the contract with the amendment that was just sent to us, I think yesterday or today.
Okay, so that's a motion, Mr. Pacheco, to table Ms. Dooney's contract for the next meeting, or we'll have to meet it for the next meeting if possible. And do we have a second to that motion to table?
Okay, I'll second it.
Motion by Mr. Pacheco, second by Mr. Shavo. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And I vote aye, so unanimous.
And on the other two, I will motion to approve, and with discussion, the contracts of Michaela Brito Padden and Michael Doyle for their positions.
And these are one-year contracts, Mr. Pacheco, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve the non-union employee contract of Michaela Brito Patton as Veteran Service Officer and Michael Doyle as Plumbing Inspector. They are each one-year contracts. Do we have a second?
Yes, I will second that, Madam Chair.
Second by Mr. Shavo. Is there any discussion?
Yes, I have discussion. I will be voting no on these contracts. As I said, I'm voting no on all contracts that contain a salary increase due to the economic circumstances we're dealing with. But I just want to ensure, as was the case with the previous contracts, that it's abundantly clear my no vote on these contracts is not a reflection on my perspective on their performance or ability to do the job or the value to the town, but rather, again, due to the economic circumstances and now the fact that 64 employees in the BR school district have been laid off.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your explanation of that. Just for the public's information, both of those contracts include a 2% increase, and I believe the intent of that was that it was in keeping with the union contracts that are in existence at this point that all include 2% increases. Do we have a second?
It was already seconded, Ms. Riley.
Okay, I'm sorry, I lost track. Okay, all in favor? All in favor of approving?
I'm voting no.
All right, roll call vote. Mr. Pacheco, no. Mr. Shavo?
I'll be honest with you, I'm not steeped enough in that one. I don't know what, I'm a little bit at odds with that situation. So
Totally understandable, Mr. Shavo. So then I guess we don't have a positive vote. I will vote yes, but that's a 1-to-1, so that does not pass. So we will hopefully put this on the agenda for the next meeting.
Ms. Riley,
Yes, Mr. Pacheco.
Unless Mr. Shivo is looking for more time, and so as not to punish the veterans agent or the plumbing inspector, now that it's been on record that I voted no, I would motion to reconsider so we can act on it, because my intention is not to cause harm to these employees.
Okay, on the motion to reconsider, do I have a second to the motion to reconsider?
absolutely, I second it, and I want it clear that I am not for or against. I just would like a little more time, because when we get to the point where we're talking about people's contracts, I just, I want to walk softly.
So, Mr. Shivo, do you want to table this, or do you want to act tonight?
I would prefer to table it and deal with it definitively at our next meeting. But if that is inconsistent with some of the bigger planning, which I'm not part of, I'm certainly willing to reconsider.
Madam Chair, do you have input?
No.
Okay. All right, I will withdraw my motion then.
Okay, so the motion is withdrawn. Do we have a motion to table at this point for the next meeting?
Motion to
Yes.
table to allow Mr. Shivo to review the contracts.
Sure, and with the certainly understanding to those employees that this is in no way any reflection on the willingness of the board to renew their contracts. It is simply under unfairness to Mr. Shavo so that he can get up to speed on exactly what we're talking about here. So motion to table for the next meeting by Mr. Pacheco. Mr. Shavo, do you want to second that?
Yes, please.
And that is seconded. All in favor of the motion to table for one or till the next meeting?
Aye.
Aye.
And I vote aye, so that is a unanimous vote to table. Thank you very much.
Madam Chair, can I get some clarification from the board? If their existing contracts expire on June 30th and these new contracts are tabled until July 14th, Should the town continue to pay them at their
absolutely.
existing rate of pay, or wait until the 14th, or how should the town handle that?
I believe their existing contract would be in effect until the new contract takes place. And then at that point, if there is that 2% increase, it would be retroactive to July 1st. But Mr. Pacheco can correct me if I'm incorrect.
Yeah, no, I would agree completely. And I think the appropriate thing to do, again, recognizing it's not about them, would be to give them retro pay, because I didn't support it and Mr. Shivo just needs his appropriate time to get caught up to speed on reviewing the contracts.
Thank you, Mr. Pacheco. All right, so with that understanding, we will go forward. Next, we have discussion of resumes on accountant consultants. Mr. Water, oh yes, I'm sorry.
I was going to say I would make a motion to make the appointment of the recommendation of Mr. King and Mr. Waters, with the caveat that we get bi-weekly reports on the workings, and we limit the consultant to 19 hours a week.
Okay, so for clarification purposes, Mr. Pacheco, you are making a motion that we approve the recommendation of our treasurer collector, Mr. Michael King, and our town administrator, Mr. Graham Waters, to appoint looking for that paper, is it Mr.
Lavalot.
Lavalot, Mr. Christopher Lavalot of Franklin, Massachusetts, as the accountant consultant for a period of time. You said not to exceed 19 hours a week. Did you say, Mr. Pacheco?
Correct, and that we have bi-weekly reporting on the progress of it, because in both of them they said they could do additional hours, and both of their proposed rates of pay were significantly higher than our previous town accountant. So I want to make sure that the board's fully kept up to date on what they're working on to ensure that taxpayer money is being spent prudently.
Absolutely. So that's a motion by Mr. Pacheco to appoint Christopher Lavalot as the accountant's consultant. Do we have a second to the motion?
I will second that, Madam Chair.
Second by Mr. Shavo. For the benefit of the public, under discussion, I think Mr. Lavalot is very well qualified. He is a director of finance. He has currently actually town accountant for the town of Dighton and the town of Foxborough. He has a Bachelor of Science in Economics, Finance, and Accounting from Bentley College. As I said, he seems eminently qualified, and so I will also vote in favor of that appointment. And by roll call vote, Mr. Pacheco.
Aye.
Mr. Shavo.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye, so it is unanimous. Thank you very much. Continuing now under new business, we have discussion.
Yeah.
Oh,
I'm sorry,
yes,
I do have one other thing on the old business, Madam Chair.
oh, sorry, yes.
It's okay. I would just motion that we resume our summer schedule effective next Tuesday, and if the need arises, we can call an emergency meeting. Town Hall is set to be closed next Tuesday and every other Tuesday, and so I think it's appropriate for us to resume that.
And that's a motion by Mr. Pacheco. Do we have a second?
Yes, I'll second that motion.
Second by Mr. Shavo. And any discussion?
None.
Okay, under discussion, I would also support that. I think, we did meet weekly through the month of June. We wanted to get through the annual town meeting, get the budget set and so forth. But I think, and we also have our town employees back to work. And I understand Mr. Waters will tell us more about that, but the public can by appointment come in, so we're getting back to normal. So I would support that as well. So on roll call, Mr. Pacheco.
Aye.
Mr. Shavo.
Aye.
And I vote aye as well, the chair, so that is unanimous. Thank you. Is there anything else under old business, Mr. Pacheco?
I have nothing, thank you.
Do you have anything under old business, Mr. Shavo?
I'm not sure, Madam Chair, that this comes under old business, but in as much as we're talking about the next meeting, I see some correspondence with it. And that is that has there been some discussion going forward, especially 2 weeks from now, that we as a group meet here at Town Hall with the usual kinds of precautions, including limiting or using the computer for outside involvement, but I would think at this stage of the game, having 4 or 5 people in here is not a big stretch. So I don't know what the rest of you all think, but would that be consistent with this discussion about future meetings?
Yeah, I think certainly it can be brought up, Mr. Shavo, because I had mentioned it several weeks ago. And I know Mr. Pacheco had some concerns. So I did contact the Massachusetts Municipal Association on Friday. And yesterday I contacted the Attorney General's office, the Division of Open Meeting, and explained to them what our thought was, that if we could meet the members of the board in person, at one location, which would be Town Hall, but have the proceedings accessible to the public remotely. If that is acceptable, and I got someone call me back from their legal office, said yes, and I further checked that on their website as far as the updated guidance on holding meetings during the state of emergency. And it does say, may public body members meet in person while requiring the general public to follow the proceedings remotely? And the answer to that is yes. The person that I spoke to said the only concern is they wouldn't want some members of the public to be allowed to come to the meeting and others not. It all has to be all or one. So I think we would just need to check with Mr. Graybars. I think he might be actually listening in. I see a Tim there, although we do have another Tim. Check with Mr. Graybars. I understand there is a phone line in the municipal meeting room, so I think it would not be very difficult. I had mentioned that just in passing to Mr. Graybars to set that up so the public could watch the meeting live on cable. I checked with Raycam, that would be possible, and people could call in on a phone line. That accessibility would be stated on our agenda. I think we're ready to move to that. But Mr. Pacheco, do you have any input on that?
No, if you talk to the Attorney General's office and they gave you the legal opinion that it's permissible, then I have no objections to it. My singular concern was ensuring that the public had equitable access to our meetings. And again, if the Attorney General, who would make a determination on open meeting law violations, has informed you that there's no violation, then I have no objection.
Thank you, Mr. Pacheco. So, Mr. Waters, perhaps you could check with Mr. Graybars and also with our Raycam Executive Director, Mr. Halen, to see if we could get that set up, if possible, for our next meeting in 2 weeks.
Absolutely.
I'm not sure if we need a motion for that. I think it's just the understanding that we can go forward. Thank you.
Madam Chair, if you don't mind, I would just make it as a motion to
sure.
ensure that any proceedings are done consistent with the guidance you as chairman received from the Attorney General's office.
Thank you, Mr. Pacheco. So that is a motion. Do we have a second?
I second that motion.
Thank you, Mr. Shavo. Roll call vote. Mr. Pacheco?
Aye.
Mr. Shavo?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. It is unanimous. Thank you very much. Moving on now to new business, discussion on pending vacancies of the Board of Health Conservation Commission clerk position and the health agent position. Mr. Waters.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Last night I sent out to the Board of Selectmen notes from the Government Study Committee meeting, which took place yesterday. The Government Study Committee made the recommendation to the Board of Selectmen to urgently seek to hire a new health agent. They recommended that the position should be advertised with a salary range of $70,000 to $85,000, depending on qualifications of the candidate, being that a more qualified candidate would be offered a higher salary. Furthermore, the committee also came to a consensus that the Board of Health Conservation Commission clerk position should be advertised as a part-time position at 25 hours per week. And those are the recommendations of the Government Study Committee. So this item was added to the agenda to seek input from the Board of Selectmen and guidance on how the Board of Selectmen would like the town to proceed, to keep the positions as is, or to move forward, or some combination thereof. So, Madam Chair, I defer to the board for their advice and guidance.
Thank you for that background, Mr. Waters. Mr. Pacheco, Mr. Shavo?
Yeah. Madam Chair, I would make a motion to post the Board of Health position with a salary of up to 80,000, not 85, 80,000, and to similarly request the town moderator assemble a hiring committee and post the opportunity to serve on that for 2 weeks, at which time the posting will stay opened until filled. But after the 2-week window, we would start reviewing the applicants.
Thank you, Mr. Pacheco. Do we have a second to that motion?
I do have one question before that, Madam Chair, and that is that the minutes from the Government Studies Committee, they're on this position. They mentioned, and I believe I'm looking at the same document, that there was some conversation about having the animal control officer, the ACO, included within the, responsible to the health agent. And they concluded from their meeting, and correct me if I don't have this right, they concluded that, and I'm reading it, that in the interview as a strong possibility, no changes, hang on, but the conclusion of the meeting, there was a consensus by the committee that the town should prioritize advertising, and that the decision of how animal control will fit under it could only be brought up in the interview as a strong possibility. So during the interview process, this question of the animal control position being brought up, I think if that's going to be the case, there ought to be a very good, well constructed job description for the animal control officer, so that in that discussion with the candidate for the health agent, that detail is there, so that person would have a good understanding of what might transpire.
If I could, by background, Mr. Chavo, I think this originated with our Government Study Committee when they first gave us their recommendations. One recommendation was that the animal control officer department, whatever, animal control, come under the Board of Health. And that was one of their recommendations. And I think with that was sent to it at the last meeting, or perhaps the meeting before that, a motion was made to have the Government Study Committee look into that in more detail, how that would happen. But in the interim, our health agent resigned. So we're sort of in a critical situation of needing to hire a health agent as soon as possible. And if my understanding, I think the Government Study Committee wants some more time to deliberate about whether the Animal Control Office should come under the Board of Health. So just as a little bit of background information there, maybe Mr. Pacheco, if you want to add to that or subtract.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Government Study Committee is going to do their due diligence, and that's going to take some time. And I think this was something that got brought up a few weeks ago by former Selectwoman Smith, and the Government Study Committee hasn't taken action on it yet. So what I would say is we move forward with hiring a health agent, and if and when a recommendation to merge animal control under Board of Health happens, I'm sure that will come with due diligence and collaboration with whoever our health agent is, the Government Study Committee and other entities. But as I had said a few weeks ago, right now there's no recommendation to do that, and it would have to pass the Board of Selectmen by a majority vote for it to even happen. So I don't know if that alleviates some of your concern or not, Mr. Shivo, but in my estimation, we have some miles to walk before the ACO might potentially go under Board of Health.
Yeah, well, and I understand that, Joe. Here's my question. Based on what you just said, if indeed going forward that the decision is made to recommend the ACO to be within the health agent's purview, and I think I'm making a distinction at this point between Board of Health and health agent, am I not, or am I wrong on that? I mean, we're the board. Yeah, so we're really talking about the possibility of the ACO reporting to the health agent. Now, here's my point. If indeed at some point in the future we decide to say, well, the ACO, really, we want the ACO to be with the health agent, then up front, the health agent should know about that possibility and be clear on what that involves. Because if they're taking the job and then we tell them 3 months from now, oh, by the way, you've got the ACO, I think it's only wise on our part to be sure they understand not only that possibility, but they understand exactly what that entails.
Oh, at 100%. And I would trust John Donahue as chairman of the screening committee and whoever he assembles on his interview team to definitely relay that that's probably going to be a conversation piece. And I think you and I are saying a lot of the same thing. We want to have whoever the health agent is looped into this process if it were to happen, as well as whoever our new ACO is. Because I think that it has to be a slow process and a thorough process to ensure it actually works and doesn't backfire, as some previous decisions have happened.
Okay, well, that being said, excuse me, Madam Chair, that being said, I'm in total sync with the.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chavo. And I think also I would just add too that I know that the Government Study Committee would, I would assume anyway, would be conducting deliberations with the health agent. So that health agent would have input into the whole process too. So I feel comfortable also supporting that motion, Mr. Pacheco, by roll call vote. Mr. Pacheco.
Aye.
Mr. Chavo.
Aye.
Chair votes aye, it is unanimous. Thank you. So, Mr. Waters, you move forward post haste.
Madam Chair.
Very good, thank you.
Yes, Mr. Pacheco.
Relative to the clerk's position, I would motion that we do not post at this time. What I think is appropriate is that when we have a new health agent on board, that individual can have input and involvement in the hiring process. So I would say we table that position until we have a health agent on board.
Is that a motion, Joe?
It is
Yes,
a
sir.
motion to table. Mr. Chavo?
Yeah, I second that motion.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Pacheco, second by Mr. Chavo. Any discussion?
None.
Hearing none. All in favor, Mr. Pacheco?
Aye.
Mr. Chavo?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, it is unanimous. Thank you very much. Anything else under new business, Mr. Pacheco?
None. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mr. Chavo?
None. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're very welcome. Next, we have the town administrator's report. Mr. Waters.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To start out with, I'd also like to reiterate the comments of the board. Kudos to the town clerk and everybody who helped out with a successful election. I have enjoyed welcoming and working with Selectman Shivo today. He and I met to begin to bring him up to speed on a lot of town matters taking place. Unfortunately, in the amount of time that we sat together, we barely scratched the surface of what's going on in town and what exciting things are on the horizon. So I will be meeting with him again in the near future. Madam Chair, as you mentioned, the town hall has partially opened. Staff have returned to work full time, and per the former health agent's recommendation that was adopted by the board, the public can access the building by advance appointment only. Our next regularly scheduled Selectmen's meeting is Tuesday, July 14th at 7 p.m. And as I found out tonight, it will be set up at the town hall, but it will be closed to the public. The public will be able to watch and listen online via platform to be announced in the future. And then finally, I wish everybody a happy 4th of July, and I hope everybody enjoys a nice long weekend, and a reminder that it should be a firework-free weekend, as they are not permitted in the state of Massachusetts. But I do hear it's going to be a nice weekend, so I encourage everybody, it's going to be nice weather, so I encourage everybody to get outside. That is all I have, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Waters. Do you have any questions of Mr. Waters, Mr. Pacheco?
Just one thing, Mr. Waters, where are you at on the bylaw project? I understand that was discussed with Government Study Committee as well.
As far as the yes, the name of the company is slipping my mind right now, but they have just sent us some recommendations today, this afternoon actually, and I will be reviewing those recommendations. It's not necessarily change recommendations, but in questions about specific bylaws. And once I review those, I will be reaching out to the appropriate people. So we're about, I'd say we're about 25% of the way through. They have reviewed our current bylaws, and they've, as well as the zoning bylaws, and they have asked questions for clarification where there's conflicts.
Great. I'd request a report at our next meeting from the administrator on where we're at with this. This is a very sensitive project. that's been ongoing for a couple of years, so I'd like us to be kept regularly in the loop.
Thank you, Mr. Pacheco.
Is that a
Mr.
motion?
Shava, do you have any questions of Mr. Waters?
No, I do not. Was that last comment?
A motion?
Mr. Pacheco? Was that a motion?
So
Would you
I
want to make
will,
that a motion, Mr. Pacheco?
I'll make it in a form of a motion that we get a report within 2 weeks from the town administrator, no later than our next meeting, on the status of the bylaw project, and then regular reports thereafter.
Thank you, Mr. Pacheco. Do you second that, Mr. Shavo?
I second that motion.
Okay, any discussion? Hearing
Aye.
none, roll call. Mr. Pacheco?
Aye.
Mr. Shavo?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, it is unanimous. Thank you. I would just mention regarding Mr. Waters, your meeting with Mr. Shavo. When you first joined us on the board, you offered to meet with each member of the Board of Selectmen, either on a monthly basis, bi-monthly basis, twice monthly, however, and I think it's extremely valuable. There are only 3 of us, and we are limited in how we can communicate outside of meetings. The more communication we can have, the better. So I would encourage you, Mr. Shavo, as well as Mr. Pacheco, to meet with Mr. Waters on a regular basis. Thank you so much. Next on our agenda is the Selectmen's report. Mr. Pacheco?
I do have a few things, but first, just in response to that, Ms. Riley, I've tried to have some communication with the town administrator. It hasn't always been productive or effective. And where I work full-time, I'm not able to meet him during business hours, but I don't want the illusion to be out there that I'm not attempting to communicate, because I have the emails to prove that I do.
Great. Communication is a terrific thing, and we can't do enough of it. Thank you, Mr. Pacheco.
And I have a few other things. First, I want to congratulate our new colleague, Selectman Shivo, on his election. Mr. Shivo, congratulations to you. I'm excited to have you back, as you and I had served together previously, and I'm looking forward to your energy and enthusiasm.
Well, thank you, Mr. Pacheco. I'm sorry, Madam Chair. I just want to say I find it's a privilege and an honor to once again serve the town and the fine residents of Raynham. I'm looking forward to working very much with both you and Pat, because I've worked with both of you over the years, you as a selectman, and for many years with Pat on the Reading Across America and other school activities. So I'm looking forward to it. I know we're going to get a lot done collaboratively, and that certainly excites me as I go forward. And thank you for your comments, Joe.
Sure, absolutely. I do have 2 other things, Ms. Riley. I just want to report out there, I had a chance to stop at Town Hall this weekend because I had to sign some stuff, and I was kind of alarmed by the lack of signs regarding social distancing and other safety precautions. And where Town Hall is now back open to the public on a limited basis, I would make a motion that the town administrator forthwith puts in place some of those health measures that are required at other establishments that are open to the public, and that there's a report to the board at our next meeting as to if this motion passes, what's been done to accommodate it.
Thank you, Mr. Pacheco. That is a motion. Do we have a second?
Yes, I think that that's a relatively it's a reasonable thing to do, given the in quotes, the climate right now as it regards safe distancing and other precautions. So yeah, I think it's a good idea. I'll second it.
Thank you, Mr. Shavo. Is there any discussion?
None.
Mr.
None.
Grant, Mr. Waters, is that doable, do you feel?
That's a
Have a
good
report
question.
for us?
I guess we'll find out.
Okay, all right, thank you. I know it's a little difficult without our health agent. All right, we have a motion and a second. A roll call vote. Mr. Pacheco?
Aye.
Mr. Shavo?
Aye.
The chair votes aye. It is unanimous. Thank you very much. Anything else, Mr. Pacheco?
Yes, one other thing, Madam Chair, and I probably could have done this under old business, but I felt like more so it's a selectmen's report because I also wanted to add some additional comments to it. But for the past couple of months, the public safety building project has been on hold due to COVID-19. I think the time is now for the committee to get back to working on that project and hopefully getting it moving forward. I would also like reports on that. So I would make a motion to instruct the building committee to start meeting again and putting plans in place to move the project forward. And I would be open to the board's suggestions as to when we would get reports back. But I think this project needs to move forward. Every day that is delayed is a day that is costing the taxpayers more money in project costs because costs continue to rise.
Yeah,
And
so,
A
I'm
motion by Mr. Pacheco. Do we have a second?
well, I'd like to add a couple of things to that to be sure that we're on the same motion, but I would say that if, and I believe the committee should, be in gear now that things are, are settling down as far as the mitigation and activities. This, the question at this stage is, are we going to move along fast enough to be able to present a final recommendation to the town at the October meeting? Because if we miss that, we're looking at the spring meeting. And it is my hope that if we move, at a decent pace, as Mr. Pacheco is suggesting or requesting, that we do have a final product to present at the October meeting. That would certainly be my personal goal. It might be a little bit aggressive to ask for a couple, some biweekly upfront just to get things underway. Perhaps biweekly would be too much long term until we get to a a construction status. I mean, when we get to construction status, I have no doubt we should be meeting biweekly. But perhaps you all might think, you might agree that a biweekly for the first month or two, or month and a half, just to see that things are really starting to roll. I would add that to the motion if we could work that in.
I have no objections to that.
Could you restate your motion then with Mr. Shavo's input, Mr. Pacheco?
Yeah, I would say that I request that the building committee begin meeting again and moving forward with the project, as well as outreach to our legislative delegation relative to the King Philip property and consistent with Mr. Shavo's additional comments.
And that is a motion by Mr. Pacheco, second by Mr. Shavo.
Yes, I'll second that.
Okay. Any further discussion?
None.
Hearing none. Mr. Pacheco on the motion. Aye. Mr. Shavo?
Aye.
Aye, and the chair votes aye. It is unanimous. Thank you very much. Is that all under Selectmen's report, Mr. Pacheco?
That is. Thank you for indulging me, Madam Chair.
Very welcome. Mr. Shavo?
One more thing, if I may, and I'm not sure this should be brought up now, so you help me with this again as a newbie. Is there going to be a discussion now or at some point on the South School and Southeast Street relative to the the leasing arrangement? Is that now, or would that be for a future meeting? I know it's been something that's been discussed. So should that be discussed now? I'll certainly yield to your good advice.
I believe Mr. Pacheco can correct me, but I believe that's on for executive session for the next meeting. Is that correct?
That's correct, Madam Chair.
Okay, that's fine then. Thank you for that. If it's in the mix, that's fine.
I know relative to that, however, there was a town meeting vote for some repairs to take place there. And I believe some of them are of a critical nature. So maybe at the next meeting, we can have a report also relative to if anything is being done along that line. I don't need that as a motion, but I'll just throw that out there.
Yeah, I don't object to that, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. Anything else, Mr. Shavo?
No, Madam Chair.
If I could just under Selectmen's report again, also congratulations, Mr. Shavo. And as you alluded to, I've enjoyed working with you in the past for Read Across America and look forward to working with you and Mr. Pacheco as a three-member team to move our town forward and do always what's in the best interest of the town of Raynham. Kudos also to Marcia Sylvia and her team for the election. And I do have one exciting press release that I received. It could become under communication, but I'll bring it up at this point. For the Rhenium Master Plan, As everybody knows, hopefully, or we get spread the word, the Raynham is creating a new master plan. The Rhenium Planning Board and newly formed Master Plan Committee, which we just approved, are working with Southeastern Regional Planning and Economic Development District, SERP, to develop a new master plan. Master plans provide guidance for public policy and decision-making in a variety of areas, including land use, economic development, housing, services and facilities, natural resources, and transportation and circulation. They are also an opportunity for community members to discuss priorities, to reach consensus on goals, and to identify strategies to achieve those goals. Rhenium's process will take approximately 2 years, wrapping up at the end of 2021, and will include 5 public workshops. The Master Plan Committee and SERPED's project team are excited, I believe, to announce, and I wanted to mention it now because by our next meeting, it would be a little late to announce that, the first public workshop will be held in July due to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, and in abundance of caution, this discovery workshop will take place online on a dedicated web page. During this time, residents, business owners, and parents are invited to visit the Discovery Workshop webpage and interact with the available resources that will explain options for participation. In addition, the project team will facilitate 2 identical live virtual Zoom meetings where community members can participate in group discussions, provide feedback, and ultimately shape the vision for Raynham's future. The Discovery Workshop will take place along the following schedule. Wednesday, July 15th, that's the day after our next meeting, the workshop webpage will launch. Saturday, July 18th at 10 a.m., a virtual Zoom meeting. Wednesday, July 22nd at 6 p.m., a virtual Zoom meeting as well. That would be the second one. And Tuesday, July 28th, the workshop webpage will close. Your input, that I'm talking to everybody out there, combined with current accurate data are the key ingredients for the master plan. To find out more, visit the project webpage, www.serped, that's SRPEDD.org/Raynham/master-plan. Also follow the Rhenium Master Plan Facebook, that's www.facebook.com/Raynham Master Plan, and Instagram at Raynham MP, pages to stay connected. And hopefully everybody's going to get involved in that, because the more people that offer their input, they get involved, the better that master plan will be. And that is all I have under Selectmen's report. And next on our agenda, we have, well, I think I just did the correspondence. I don't believe we have any other correspondence, do we, Mr. Waters? I'm sorry.
No, I had a quick point I'd like to make to the board. Through a lot of the motions that the board has made regarding the public safety building and the South School, and any other project that is relevant to a warrant that recently passed at the town meeting, no progress, no financial, nothing can be spent on those projects until we have a town accountant on board and the town accountant establishes accounts for those expenses charged against. So I know for the public safety building, the architect and the project manager have been coordinating. I don't know if any expenses can be charged against the account yet, because the account hasn't been set up. And then same with the repairs to the South School. So I just want to put that before the board and as a sort of a word of caution before expecting too much from the projects.
Madam Chair, point of information, the account for the public safety building was created a couple years ago when this project started and we funded it, so there should be no issues with that whatsoever.
Thank you, Mr. Pacheco. Perhaps our building committee can meet in any case and start working. So, but appreciate that clarification from both of you, gentlemen.
Also, Madam Chair, I understand there was a letter of resignation submitted today. I didn't get it in my packet. I don't know if you got it in your packet, but I was called about it. So I'm curious if Mr. Waters can comment on that, because it should have been in our packets.
Sure. I was the Chair of the Board of Assessors submitted a letter of resignation to be effective August 1st. I believe Mr. Lally is moving out of town and can no longer serve on the Board of Assessors. The item was going on the next agenda on the 14th for reading because the item was just received today.
All right, very good. And on the, yes, Mr. Pacheco.
I'd motion to accept the resignation with deep regret. Wish Assessor Lally the best to him and his wife Linda as they start enjoying retirement, and we will act on it in 2 weeks.
Was that a motion, Mr. Pacheco?
Yes, that was.
Okay, a motion to accept the resignation with deep regret. Do we have a second?
Yes, I'll second that motion.
Second by Mr. Chavo. And under discussion, I would just echo Mr. Pacheco's comments. Thank you, Mr. Lally, for your service. You will be sorely missed. With no further discussion, all in favor, roll call vote. Mr. Pacheco.
Aye.
Mr. Chavo.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. And we will discuss that in 2 weeks, as you mentioned, Mr. Pacheco. All right, next, press time. I know we have someone from Raynham, I believe, out there in remote land. Do you have anything for us, Raynham? Hearing nothing. And yes, I see a microphone.
No, we have nothing online either, Pat.
Thank you. All right. Next is emergency business. Is there any emergency business, Mr. Pacheco?
And Madam Chair.
Do you have any, Mr. Chavo?
None, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much. Citizens and community input. Does anyone wish to address the board at this time? If so, I would just ask you to please state your name and address. Mr. Halen, do you see anyone interested in speaking?
There's no one on social media, Pat, and no one in the chat window.
Okay, thank you very much. Continuing then, we have performance of administrative duties, approval of Town of Raynham invoice and payroll warrants dated June 30th, 2020. Do we have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve by Mr. Pacheco, and that goes with authorization for the town administrator to sign those at this time. Do we have a second?
Second, Madam Chair.
By Mr. Chavo. Any discussion?
None.
All in favor? Mr. Pacheco?
Aye.
Mr.
Aye.
Chavo? Chair votes
Aye.
aye. Unanimous. Thank you. Next, we have approval of Raynham Police invoice and payroll warrants dated June 30th, 2020.
Miss Riley, I'm not going to make a motion on that one.
Correct. Mr. Chavo, would you like to make that motion?
I would be happy to make that motion.
Thank you, and I will second that. And by roll call vote, Mr. Pacheco?
Abstain.
Mr. Chavo?
Make a motion.
And you, so that's a yes, Mr. Chavo, thank you. And the chair votes aye, so that is a 2 in favor, 2 positive with 1 abstention. That is approved. Approval of supplemental warrant dated June 30th, 2020.
Motion to approve.
Motion by Mr. Pacheco, second by
Second.
Mr. Chavo. Any discussion? Hearing none, roll call. Mr. Pacheco?
Aye.
Mr. Chavo?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, that is approved. Just one last thing, I would just like to, before we take a motion to go into executive session, again, thank both Mr. Chavo and Mr. Pacheco for all of your efforts and your support. I'd like to send a thank you out to all of our team players, all of our department heads, also Mr. Waters, all of our town employees and residents. Everything that you do to support our town of Raynham is greatly appreciated, and especially our first responders, our police and our firefighters, for everything they do to keep us safe. We can't thank them enough for all of that. And with that, I will ask for a motion to go into executive session in accordance with Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 21, Purpose 3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation if an open meeting has a detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigating position of the public body and the chair so declares, and to return to open meeting only to adjourn. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Pacheco, second by
Second.
Mr. Chavo. Roll call vote. Mr. Pacheco?
Aye.
Mr. Shavo?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Meeting is adjourned. We're going into executive session. Thank you all very much.